Alara's hands froze mid-wipe across the tavern bar when the door burst open with enough force to rattle every bottle on the shelf. Tavern. The Alpha King stood in the doorway, flanked by warriors whose leather armor gleamed in the firelight, his amber eyes sweeping the dimly lit room with the precision of a predator tracking prey. For 7 years, Alara had kept this moment from happening. 7 years of running, of sleeping with one eye open, of building a life in the Forgotten Mountains where even royal scouts didn't venture. Then she watched his entire body go rigid. His nostrils flared, once, twice, his massive frame coiling like a spring about to snap. The color drained from his face before flooding back with raw, desperate emotion. Those infamous amber eyes, the mark of the royal bloodline, widened with something Alara had never seen in the fearsome Alpha King. Shock. Devastation. Hope. Moonflower and spring rain. Tavern breathed, his voice cracking on the words like fractured glass. The oracle scent. Behind the kitchen door, the sound of shattering porcelain split the air. Seraphina. Alara's heart lurched into her throat as every warrior's had snapped toward the sound. The room held its breath. 7 years of carefully constructed lies, of false names and hidden identities, crumbled in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Tavern's gaze locked onto Alara with the intensity of a man staring at a ghost. His warriors shifted, blocking every exit without being ordered. There would be no running this time. No disappearing into the night while he slept. No new village, no new names, no new beginning. She's alive, Tavern said, and it wasn't a question. His voice carried across the tavern like a blade drawn slowly from its sheath. Quiet, deadly, inevitable. My mate. The oracle I've been searching for. She's here. Alara's fingers tightened on the bar rag, knuckles white. Every instinct screamed at her to move, to grab Seraphina and run the way she had 7 years ago. But the kitchen door creaked open, and her sister stepped into view, beautiful, ethereal, with oracle marks beginning to glow faintly on her skin in response to her mate's presence. The mate bond, suppressed for 7 agonizing years, roared to life between them like wildfire. The Alpha King had found what he'd lost, and the reckoning Alara had fought against for 7 years had finally arrived. Before we go back to where this all began, if you're as hooked as Alara is cornered right now, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know if you're Team Alara, protect family at all costs, or Team Tavern. The truth will set you free. Let's build this pack together. Now, let's rewind to the night that shattered 3 lives forever. 7.5 years ago, Alara's world smelled of wood smoke, mountain herbs, and the sharp tang of iron from the smith next door. The Oracle village where she and Seraphina had been born was small, barely 24 families nestled in a valley so remote that most wolves forgot it existed. And that's exactly how they'd survived for generations. Alara was 20 years old, strong from hauling water and chopping wood, her hands perpetually stained from the dye work she did to help their mother. Seraphina was only 16, barely coming into her oracle powers, still giggling at boys and braiding wildflowers into her hair. Their parents were respected elders. Their lives were simple, predictable, safe. But Seraphina had started having dreams. Dreams of amber eyes and a voice that called to her across impossible distances. Dreams that made her oracle marks glow in the dark. Their mother had smiled knowingly and whispered that Seraphina's fated mate was coming, that the moon goddess was preparing her for something extraordinary. Alara should have been happy for her sister. Instead, unease coiled in her gut like a snake ready to strike. The first time she heard the name Alpha King Tavern, it was from a traveling merchant who'd stopped to water his horses. He spoke of the young king's coronation, of his strength in battle, of the way packs across the territories bent the knee. He mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that the king remained unmated, that the council was pressuring him to choose a queen. Alara watched Seraphina's face light up with recognition she couldn't explain, watched her sister's hand drift to her chest as if feeling a pull towards something far away. And Alara felt the first whisper of fear. 2 weeks later, smoke filled the sky, and Alara's world ended in blood and flames. The autumn moon hung fat and silver over the Oracle village when Alara heard the first scream. She was 3 miles away, returning from the neighboring settlement, where she'd spent 2 days bartering dyed fabrics for winter supplies. The cart creaked beneath her as she urged the tired horse faster, her wolf already clawing to the surface, sensing something fundamentally wrong with the air itself.
Smoke. Blood.
The acrid stench of burning thatch, and something worse, the metallic tang of fresh death carried on the wind. Alara abandoned the cart halfway up the mountain path, shifting mid-stride. Her wolf form tore through the forest, paws barely touching ground, branches whipping past in a blur of brown and gray. The closer she got, the worse it became. Not just smoke now, but the overwhelming reek of rogue wolves, unwashed, feral, mad with bloodlust.
Too many of them.
Far too many. She burst through the tree line and her wolf stumbled, nearly going down. The village was gone. Not damaged. Not attacked.
Gone.
Every building burned or burning, bodies scattered across the communal square like broken dolls. The healer's cottage where she'd learned to stitch wounds. The elder's hall where she'd celebrated her first shift. The small stone house where her mother had taught her to work dye until her fingers were stained permanent blue. All of it reduced to ash and screaming silence. Alara shifted back to human form, naked and shaking, her legs barely holding her upright. She couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
Her eyes tracked across the carnage mechanically. There was old Thomas, who'd carved her first wooden practice sword. There was Mira, who'd been pregnant with her third child. There was the blacksmith, his hammer still clutched in his cooling hand. Serafina. The name detonated in her chest like a physical blow. Alara ran, feet slipping in blood she couldn't look at, past bodies she couldn't name. Their house, her parents' house, was half collapsed, one wall blown outward as if something massive had struck it. The door hung from a single hinge. Sarah? Her voice cracked, raw and desperate. Serafina? Nothing. Just the crackle of flames and the settling groan of dying structures. Alara tore through the wreckage, shoving aside burning beams with her bare hands, not feeling the burns, not caring. The kitchen. The sitting room. Her parents' bedroom. She found them in the doorway. Her father sprawled across the threshold, throat torn open, still in a half-shifted state. Her mother beyond him, collapsed forward as if she'd been trying to reach something. Claw marks carved deep into her back. They died, protecting something. Alara dropped to her knees, shoving her mother's body aside with shaking hands, and there, pressed into the corner where the walls met, covered in her parents' blood, barely breathing, was Serafina. No, 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 no. Alara dragged her sister out, cradling her against her chest. Serafina's face was gray, her breathing shallow and wet. Deep gashes scored her arms and torso, where she'd tried to fight. Her oracle marks, usually subtle silver lines along her collarbone, were burned black as if someone had tried to sear them off her skin. Sarah, stay with me.
Please.
Please stay with me. Serafina's eyes fluttered, unfocused and glazed with shock. Blood bubbled at the corner of her mouth. 16 years old and dying in the ruins of her home. That's when Alara heard them. Horses. Warriors. The thunder of organized movement cutting through the chaos. She looked up through the broken wall and saw them cresting the ridge. Royal Guard, at least 50 strong, their armor catching moonlight, banners bearing the Northern Territory's crest snapping in the smoke-thick wind. At their head, mounted on a warhorse as black as midnight, was the Alpha King himself. Even from a distance, even through her grief and rage, Alara recognized Tavern. He was unmistakable, massive, powerful, radiating authority that made every wolf in range want to bow. His braided hair whipped behind him, his face carved from stone and fury as he took in the destruction. He was too late. Too late. Tharon's howl split the night, anguish and rage woven together into something that made the trees shake. His warriors scattered immediately, searching for survivors, for enemies, for anything left to save. But Alara could see it in the slump of his shoulders as he dismounted, in the way his hands clenched and unclenched. He knew. Everyone was dead, except Serafina. Alara watched him move through the village, stopping at each body, his face growing harder with every corpse. She watched him catch a scent on the wind that made his entire body go rigid, watched him turn slowly toward her parents' ruined house with an expression of such desperate hope it was almost obscene.
He's searching for his mate.
The realization hit her like ice water. Serafina had been dreaming of amber eyes. The oracle marks that had started glowing. The pull she couldn't explain. This male, this king who had failed to protect them, who had arrived after the massacre was complete, who had left them vulnerable to slaughter, he was Serafina's fated mate. And he was walking straight toward them. "Where were you?" The words ripped from Alara's throat before she could stop them. Theron's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto hers through the broken wall. "Where were you when they needed you? You're the Alpha King. You should have protected us." Theron moved faster than should have been possible, clearing the rubble in 2 strides. He started to speak, started to reach for Serafina, and Alara saw it, the exact moment he caught her scent, the exact moment he recognized his dying mate in Alara's arms. His face shattered.
No.
His voice broke. "No, not her. Anyone but. Get away from us." Alara clutched Serafina tighter, her sister's blood soaking through her skin. "You don't get to touch her. You don't get to mourn. This is your fault. I was hunting rogues in the Eastern Territories." Theron's words came fast, desperate. "Someone sent intelligence that they were planning an attack there. I took most of my warriors. By the time we realized it was false information. Convenient." Alara bared her teeth. Very convenient. Around them, warriors were calling out. No survivors. No rogues remaining. Just death and ash. Theron's second-in-command appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "Your Majesty, we need to find them." Theron's command cracked like a whip. "Every rogue involved. I don't care if you have to track them to the ends of the earth. Find them." But Alara wasn't listening anymore. She was watching Serafina's chest rise and fall, each breath more labored than the last. Her sister's eyes had fallen closed. The oracle marks were barely visible under the burns. "I can't let him have her. He failed once. He'll fail again." The thought crystallized with absolute clarity. If Theron took Serafina, claimed her as his mate, brought her to his fortress, she would be a target. The rogues who'd done this would come back to finish the job. The forces in the royal court would use her. And this male who had promised protection but delivered death would let her die properly next time. Alara made her decision in the space between one heartbeat and the next. She waited until Theron was distracted, giving orders to his warriors, coordinating the search. She waited until the chaos provided cover. Then she shifted, careful not to jostle Serafina, gripping her sister's limp body in her jaws the way a mother wolf carries her pup. And she ran. Behind her, Theron's anguished roar shook the mountains. "And oh, come back. Please." But Alara was already gone, disappearing into the forest with the only family she had left, leaving the Alpha King to grieve alone in the ashes of his mate's village, not knowing that the oracle he would search for over 7 years was still alive, barely, and running further away, with every step. The healer Alara found 3 days later worked in a dirt floor cottage that smelled of death and desperate hope. She was human, old enough that her hands shook when she unwrapped Serafina's wounds, but her eyes were sharp when they met Alara's across the makeshift bed. "She should be dead," the woman said flatly. "Whatever kept her breathing this long wasn't medicine. Can you save her? Maybe. If infection doesn't take her first. If her will to live is stronger than her body's desire to quit." The healer pressed a foul-smelling poultice against the claw marks. "You got coin." Alara had 17 silver pieces sewn into her skirt hem, everything she'd earned from 2 months of dye work. She handed over 12 without hesitation. Serafina burned with fever for a week. Alara didn't sleep, just sat beside her sister's bed pressing cool cloths to her forehead, forcing broth between her cracked lips, listening to her delirious whispers. Sometimes Serafina called for their mother. Sometimes she screamed about fire and teeth and darkness. Once, she opened her eyes and stared directly at Alara without recognition, her oracle marks flaring silver bright for a single terrible moment before going dark again. On the 8th day, the fever broke. Seraphina's eyes opened clear and focused, and the first thing she said was, "Where are they?" Alara told her. Watched her 16-year-old sister's face crumple, watched her turn toward the wall and go silent for 3 days. When Seraphina finally spoke again, her voice was different, flatter, emptier, as if something essential had been carved out and left hollow. They stayed with the healer for 2 months, long enough for Seraphina's wounds to close into angry red scars. Long enough for Alara to find work at a nearby mill, hauling grain sacks until her shoulders ached. Long enough to hear rumors that the Alpha King himself was searching the territories, questioning refugees, tracking any whisper of oracle scent. They left at dawn on the first day of winter. The first year was the hardest. Alara worked whatever jobs she could find that paid under the table, washing dishes in taverns where no one asked names, mucking stables, even a brutal 3-month stint at a lumber camp where the foreman didn't care that she was female as long as she could swing an axe. Seraphina stayed hidden, too recognizable with her oracle marks, too fragile still to be seen. Twice they nearly got caught. Once when a royal scout stopped at the inn where Alara was working, asking about a young woman with silver marks. Once when a drunk patron grabbed Seraphina's arm as she carried supplies from the market, saw the faint glow of her marks in the dim light, and started asking questions. They were on the road within the hour, leaving everything behind. Alara learned to read the signs of pursuit, learned which towns had too many strangers, which taverns had ears that reported to royal authorities, learned to keep their stays short and their identities fluid. She became Elena, Ella, Elaine. Seraphina was Sarah, Sophie, Celine. Always moving, always watching over her shoulder. Somewhere in the 2nd year, Seraphina stopped crying, stopped talking much at all. Her oracle marks, which had glowed silver since puberty, went dormant, just pale scarred lines against her collarbone that could almost pass for old injuries. The visions that had come to her in dreams dried up completely, as if her gifts had looked at the wreckage of her life and decided they weren't wanted. "It's better this way," Seraphina said once, when Alara asked. "Easier to hide." But Alara saw how her sister stared at her reflection in water, saw the way she traced her darkened marks with trembling fingers. The oracle gifts weren't gone. They were just buried under grief and trauma, suffocating slowly. By the 4th year, they developed a rhythm. Alara found work. Seraphina stayed invisible. They saved what little they could, moved every few months before anyone got curious. The rage that had sustained Alara through the initial flight had settled into something colder, a steady, burning conviction that keeping Seraphina hidden was the only thing keeping her alive. But in the 5th year, things started changing. Seraphina began waking from dreams she wouldn't talk about, her marks glowing faintly in the dark. She'd stand at windows staring at nothing, one hand pressed to her chest as if feeling for something that wasn't there. When Alara asked what was wrong, Seraphina would just shake her head and whisper, "I don't know. Something's pulling at me." The dreams got worse. Alara would wake to find Seraphina standing in the middle of their shared room, eyes open but unseeing, lips moving soundlessly. The oracle marks would be blazing silver, pulsing in time with her sister's heartbeat. Once, Seraphina grabbed Alara's wrist hard enough to bruise and said in a voice that wasn't quite her own, "He's still searching. Why won't he stop? Why won't he just give up?"
Who?
Alara demanded, though she already knew. Seraphina blinked, awareness flooding back. I saw amber eyes. I felt. She pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. Nothing. It was nothing. The mate bond, Alara realized with sick certainty. Even suppressed, even buried under years of distance and denial, it was still there. Still calling to Seraphina. Still pulling her toward a male who'd failed to protect her once, and would fail again. They kept moving. But Seraphina was growing restless in a way Alara couldn't contain. She'd started questioning why they never stayed anywhere long. Why Alara forbade her from making friends. Why they had to live like ghosts. "I'm 22 years old," Serafina said during one particularly bitter argument in a rented room above a blacksmith's forge. I've been running since I was 16. When does it stop? When it's safe.
And when will that be?
When I'm 30. 40? When I've forgotten what it's like to have a real conversation with anyone except you. Serafina's voice cracked. I'm not living, Alara. I'm just existing. That's when Alara saw the posting for a tavern in the northern mountains. Remote. Isolated. So far off main roads that even merchants rarely ventured there. The owner was dying, desperate to sell cheap to anyone willing to keep the place running. It was perfect. Permanent enough to give Serafina stability, remote enough to stay hidden. They bought it with every coin they'd saved over 6 years. The tavern was called the Stag's Head, weathered and worn but solid. The village of Millhaven was barely 30 families, mostly farmers and trappers who kept to themselves. No wolves. No pack politics. No questions. For the first time in 6 years, Serafina smiled. Really smiled. We're staying? She asked, standing in the empty tavern that smelled of old wood and stale ale. We're staying, Alara confirmed. The 7th year was almost peaceful. Serafina helped in the kitchen, never showing her face to customers but humming while she worked, something Alara hadn't heard since before the massacre. They planted an herb garden, fixed the sagging porch, started talking about maybe getting a cat. But the dreams persisted. Serafina would wake gasping, sheets tangled, her marks glowing bright enough to cast shadows. She stopped mentioning them to Alara, but Alara heard her sister whispering to herself in the dark. I don't know who you are. I don't know why you won't leave me alone. 2 weeks before everything fell apart, Serafina said something that made Alara's blood run cold. Do you believe in destiny? Her sister was kneading dough, not looking up. Like, if something's meant to happen, can you really run from it forever? Yes, Alara said firmly. You can. We have. Serafina's hands stilled. What if the thing we're running from is actually the thing that's supposed to save us? It won't. How do you know? Because I was there. Alara's voice came out harder than she intended. I saw what his protection was worth. I won't let it happen again. Serafina finally looked up, and something in her eyes was different. Older. Tired. Maybe that's not your choice to make anymore. The next morning, the first autumn leaves began to fall. And 3 days later, the tavern door would burst open with enough force to shatter 7 years of carefully constructed safety, and Tavern would stand there with his warriors, amber eyes locking onto Serafina with the force of recognition that couldn't be denied any longer. But Alara didn't know that yet. She was just pouring ale and watching her sister knead bread, believing they were finally safe. Everyone out. Theron's voice carried the weight of absolute command, and the handful of villagers still nursing their drinks scattered like mice before a hunting cat. Within seconds, the tavern stood empty except for the 3 of them and the warriors posted at every exit. Alara stayed rooted behind the bar, one hand beneath the counter where she kept a silver blade. Serafina had emerged fully from the kitchen now, standing in the doorway with both hands pressed flat against the frame as if it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her oracle marks blazed so bright, they cast silver light across her throat and collarbone, pulsing in time with her rapid breathing. Theron couldn't stop staring at her. His hands opened and closed at his sides, his entire body vibrating with the visible effort of not crossing the room. When he finally spoke, his voice was wrecked. Serafina. The sound of her name on his lips made Serafina flinch. Her marks flared brighter, and for a moment the air between them shimmered with something Alara could almost see, threads of silver light stretching taut, pulling, demanding. The mate bond, no longer suppressible, snapping into place with 7 years of accumulated force. Don't. Alara's snarl cut through the moment. Don't you dare speak to her. Theron's gaze finally shifted to Alara, and the grief in his amber eyes was so raw it almost made her falter. Almost. You took her from me. You let me believe she was dead. I mourned, his voice broke. I mourned for 7 years.
Good.
You should mourn. You should know what it feels like to lose everything because you failed to protect it. I didn't fail. I was deceived. Theron reached slowly into his leather armor, pulling out a worn journal. He placed it on the nearest table with careful precision. The attack on your village wasn't random. The intelligence that drew me away wasn't coincidence. It was orchestrated. Alara didn't move toward the journal. Convenient excuse. Read it. His command held no alpha power, just exhaustion and desperate truth.
Please.
7 years of hunting rogues, interrogating survivors, tracking every thread back to its source. It's all there. Serafina moved first, drawn forward as if pulled by invisible strings. She picked up the journal with trembling hands, opening to pages covered in tight, precise handwriting. Alara watched her sister's face change, shock, then confusion, then something that might have been horror. He's telling the truth, Serafina whispered. The rogues that attacked us, they were hired. Someone paid them. Someone who knew about. Her eyes lifted to Tavern. About us. About the mate bond that hadn't formed yet. My half-brother. Theron's jaw clenched hard enough that Alara heard his teeth grind.
Kale.
He discovered you were my fated mate through court spies who tracked Oracle bloodlines. If I bonded with an Oracle and produced an heir, his claim to the throne would be worthless. So, he arranged to eliminate you before the bond could form. Alara felt the world tilt sideways. That's impossible. How would he know? Because I told him. Theron's voice went flat, dead. When I first caught your scent during a diplomatic visit near the Oracle territories, I was young, excited. I confided in the brother I trusted. He smiled, congratulated me, and then immediately began planning your death. He pulled out another document, this one sealed with a broken wax crest. This is a letter I intercepted 3 months ago. My scouts captured one of Kale's spies. Under interrogation, he confirmed everything. Serafina was reading faster now, turning pages with increasing urgency. The false intelligence about Eastern Territory attacks. The timing that ensured you'd be days away. The specific targeting of Oracle Pack members to make it look like a random rogue assault. Her voice shook. It's all here. Names, payments, routes. He planned every detail. I've spent 7 years hunting the rogues involved, Theron continued. I've executed 37 of them personally. The rest are in my dungeons awaiting trial. But I couldn't find the source until 6 months ago, couldn't trace it back to Kale until I had that spy. His eyes found Alara again. I failed to protect your village. That's truth I'll carry forever. But not because I was negligent. Because I was too blind to see the enemy standing beside me. The silver blade felt heavy in Alara's hand. 7 years of rage, of certainty, of righteous fury. All of it crumbling under the weight of evidence she couldn't dispute. You still arrived too late. I know. The words came out broken. I dream about it every night. Arriving to find the village burning. Searching through bodies, looking for her face, and praying I wouldn't find it. Catching her scent and feeling hope for one terrible moment before realizing it was fading, disappearing, being carried away by someone who hated me enough to take her. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I thought you'd taken her body to bury her where I couldn't defile it with my presence. Serafina made a small, wounded sound. The journal slipped from her hands, and suddenly she was swaying, her marks flaring so bright Alara had to squint against the light. It's too much. The bond, I can't. Theron moved on pure instinct, crossing the room in 2 strides to catch Serafina as her knees buckled. The moment his skin touched hers, the tavern exploded with silver light. It poured from Serafina's marks, cascading across the walls and ceiling, and suddenly Alara could see it, really see it, the mate bond manifesting as visible threads of power wrapping around both of them, pulling tight, locking into place with 7 years of suppressed force releasing all at once. Serafina gasped, her back arching, her hands clutching Theron's arms hard enough to bruise. I see you.
I've always seen you.
In my dreams, calling for me, searching. Her eyes opened, fully silver now, no pupil visible. You never stopped looking. Even when everyone told you to move on, to take another mate, you refused. How could I? Theron cradled her against his chest, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. You are mine. You are mine. Nothing could change that. The oracle power surging through Seraphina was unlike anything Alara had seen before. Not the gentle prophecies their mother had given, but something vast and terrible, visions flooding through her sister's consciousness with punishing force. Seraphina's lips moved, speaking in that not quite her own voice. He's coming. Your brother learned we're alive. His spies saw, they reported he's already moving. 3 days. Maybe 4. Assassins, not rogues this time. Trained killers with silver weapons and orders to leave no witnesses. The temperature in the tavern dropped 10 degrees. Theron's alpha power rolled off him in waves, making every warrior outside straighten to attention. How many? 12. Led by him personally. Seraphina's eyes cleared slightly, focusing on Theron with desperate intensity. He won't risk failure this time. He'll come himself to ensure I die. Over my corpse. That's what he's counting on. The oracle light began to fade, leaving Seraphina pale and shaking. He wants you distracted, emotional, fighting to protect me instead of thinking clearly. He knows the mate bond will make you reckless. Alara found her voice finally, though it came out scraped raw. Why didn't your visions warn us before? Why now? Seraphina's gaze shifted to her sister, and there was understanding there, and forgiveness, and something that might have been pity. Because I was suppressing them. Suppressing everything. But the moment the bond locked into place, the moment I stopped fighting what I am. She touched her blazing marks gently. The oracle doesn't ask permission. She just shows truth, whether you're ready for it or not. Theron was already moving, strategic mind overriding emotion. Garrick, his second-in-command, appeared in the doorway instantly. Full defensive perimeter. I want scouts on every approach to this village. No one gets close without us knowing. He turned back to Alara, and his voice gentle despite the steel underneath. I know you don't trust me. I know I haven't earned it. But if you want your sister to survive the next 3 days, I need you to stop fighting me and start fighting with me. Alara looked at Seraphina, still wrapped in Theron's arms, her marks finally dimming to a soft glow. Her sister met her eyes and gave the smallest nod. Permission.
Trust. Choice.
Fine, Alara forced out. But understand this, if you fail her again, if you let her get hurt because you're too busy playing king to actually protect her, I will kill you myself. Bond or no bond. Theron's answering smile was sharp and cold and absolutely sincere. If I fail her again, I'll hand you the blade. Theron spread the documents across the tavern's largest table like a general preparing for war. Maps marked with red ink, letters bearing various seals, sketches of faces Alara didn't recognize. 7 years of investigation laid bare under flickering candlelight. This is Garrett. Theron tapped a sketch of a round-faced man with thinning hair. Honey merchant. Comes through Millhaven every few months, correct? Alara's stomach dropped. He bought supplies from us last spring. He's been watching you for 8 months. One of Kale's longest-serving spies. Theron pulled out a ledger filled with cramped handwriting. He documented everything. Your routines, Seraphina's movements in the kitchen, the times you're most vulnerable. He's the one who confirmed Oracle sent traces leading to this tavern. Seraphina had gone very still beside Alara, her face draining of color. The nice man who gave me candied ginger, who asked about my herb garden. Pumping you for information about what you grow, what you use for cooking, looking for evidence of Oracle healing practices. Theron's voice was gentle but relentless. He reported back to Kale that you showed knowledge beyond what a normal villager should possess. Alara's hands clenched into fists. She'd served that bastard drinks, taken his coin, smiled at his small talk about weather and harvest yields. Who else? The next sketch showed a severe-looking woman with a long braid.
Marta.
The new healer who arrived last winter. She examined Seraphina when she had that fever. Yes? She was kind, Seraphina whispered. She gave me tea and checked my pulse, and her hand flew to her throat, covering her oracle marks. She saw them. She touched them and said they were interesting scars. She wrote Kale a detailed report about their shape, their silvered appearance, the way they seemed to glow faintly when you were distressed. Theron pulled out another document. She also noted your unusual resistance to certain herbs that would have sedated a normal wolf but barely affected you. Oracle blood processes toxins differently. The evidence kept coming. The couple who'd moved into the cottage across the lane, Kale's people, using a borrowed child to seem like a harmless family. The traveling blacksmith who'd stayed 3 days to repair the tavern's hinges, actually mapping the building's weak points. The merchant who'd been so interested in Seraphina's bread recipes, cataloging her daily schedule. They've been building a complete intelligence network around you for months, Theron said, waiting for Kale's order to move. Alara felt sick. Every friendly face, every kind word, every seemingly innocent interaction had been a trap slowly closing. How did we not notice? Because you were looking for royal scouts and warriors. Obvious threats. Theron's expression was grim. Kale learned from his first attempt. No rogues this time. No messy massacres that leave evidence. Just quiet observation until he had everything he needed, then a surgical strike designed to look like a robbery gone wrong. Seraphina's marks began glowing again, that soft silver pulse that meant visions were coming. She gripped the table edge, breathing through it. When she spoke, her voice carried that eerie dual quality, herself and something older speaking simultaneously. The attack comes at midnight. They'll disable the perimeter first, cut the throat of whoever's standing watch. Then simultaneous entry through 3 points: front door, kitchen entrance, the second-floor window that doesn't latch properly. How do you know about the window? Alara demanded. Because I see them planning it. I see Kale standing over a model of this building, pointing to our exact vulnerabilities. Seraphina's eyes had gone fully silver. He's meticulous. Patient. He's been waiting 7 years for this, and he won't fail again. Theron was already making notes, his tactical mind processing every detail. What about his personal guard? How many are seasoned fighters versus hired muscle? The visions shifted behind Seraphina's eyes. 8 veterans from his personal regiment. 4 hired assassins from the southern territories. All of them have killed before. All of them have been promised land and titles when Kale takes the throne. She swayed slightly, and Alara caught her elbow. They believe they're doing righteous work, eliminating a false mate who would weaken the bloodline with oracle mysticism. Kale's been spreading propaganda, Theron said darkly, telling his supporters that oracles corrupt true wolves, that their powers are unnatural. He's built an entire faction based on fear of what you represent. Alara studied the maps, the evidence, the years of careful documentation. Everything pointed to one conclusion. Theron was telling the truth. He'd been hunting Kale's conspiracy, not neglecting his duty. He'd been searching for Seraphina, not abandoning her. And she, Alara, had stolen 7 years from both of them based on a grief-stricken assumption. The realization sat in her chest like a stone. Why didn't you tell someone? The question came out harder than intended. If you suspected Kale, why not expose him to your council? With what proof? Suspicions? Theories? Theron's laugh was bitter. Kale is beloved by half the court. Charming, generous, always ready with counsel. When I started investigating him quietly, 3 of my most trusted advisors tried to convince me I was paranoid, that grief over losing my mate was making me see conspiracies where none existed. He pulled out a final document, this one bearing the royal seal. I only got solid evidence 3 months ago when my scouts captured that spy. Before then, everything was circumstantial. Accusing the king's brother of treason without proof would have torn the pack apart. Seraphina touched his hand lightly, and the bond flared between them, a visible shimmer of silver light.
You've been alone in this.
Fighting your own people, doubted by your council, grieving a mate you couldn't even properly mourn because everyone thought you should move on. The council kept presenting suitable matches. Pure bloodline females, strong warriors, politically advantageous alliances. Theron's voice went flat. They said 3 years was sufficient mourning period. That I needed an heir, needed to secure the succession. Some implied I was weak for clinging to the memory of a mate I'd barely known. But you refused. It wasn't a question. Alara had heard those rumors during their travels. The Alpha King who wouldn't take a chosen mate, who drove his counsel to distraction with his stubborn loyalty to a dead oracle. The bond doesn't fade because someone tells you it should. It doesn't ease because time passes or council members lecture you about duty. Theron's amber eyes found Seraphina, and the raw devotion in them was almost painful to witness. I felt you. Even across years and distance, even believing you were dead, I felt the echo of where you should have been. An empty space shaped exactly like you, that nothing else could fill. The silver light between them intensified, and Alara watched her sister's carefully constructed walls finally crumble. Seraphina moved around the table, drawn by forces beyond her control, and when Theron opened his arms, she walked into them like coming home. I'm sorry, Seraphina breathed against his chest. I'm so sorry I let her hide me. I was scared and broken, and I didn't know.
No.
Theron's voice was fierce.
You survived.
That's all that mattered. Surviving was the bravest thing you could have done. Alara turned away from their reunion, staring instead at the evidence spread across the table. 7 years of her life built on a lie she'd told herself. 7 years of running from the one person who could have protected them. 7 years of keeping Seraphina from her destiny because Alara couldn't see past her own rage and fear. I should have asked questions, she said to no one in particular. That night when you arrived, I should have demanded explanations instead of assuming the worst. You were protecting your sister. I would have done the same. Theron's voice came from behind her, still holding Seraphina, but speaking to Alara with careful respect. But now we face Kale together. And I need to know, can you fight beside me? Can you trust me enough to let me protect both of you? Alara looked at the maps showing approach routes, at the sketch of Kale's cold, handsome face, at the detailed plans for infiltration and murder. She thought about 7 years of running, of fear, of sleeping with weapons under her pillow. She thought about Seraphina's suppressed gifts, her stolen choices, her half-life in shadows. I'll fight beside you, Alara said finally. Not because I trust you yet, but because my sister does and I trust her. Theron's nod was acceptance of terms, nothing more. Then let's make sure Kale regrets the day he decided to hunt oracles. Seraphina, I need you to tell me everything you see in those visions. Every detail, no matter how small. Alara, you know this building's layout better than anyone will use that. Garrick. His second appeared instantly. Get me building schematics, defensive positions, anything that gives us an advantage. We have 3 days to turn a tavern into a fortress. Let's get to work. The tavern held its breath as midnight approached. Alara crouched behind the overturned bar, twin blades strapped to her thighs, listening to the too-quiet night beyond the shuttered windows. Theron's warriors were positioned throughout the building, Garrick in the shadows by the kitchen, 2 more upstairs covering the weak window, others scattered in defensive positions they'd spent 3 days perfecting. Seraphina sat in the center of the main room, eyes closed, oracle marks blazing like captured starlight. She was their early warning system, tracking the assassins through visions as they approached through the forest. Every few minutes, she'd whisper updates. 200 yards. Moving fast. They've split into 3 groups like I saw. Theron stood near the front door, utterly still, his alpha power dampened to nothing. He'd removed his armor an hour ago, trading metal for dark leather that wouldn't reflect moonlight. The massive sword strapped across his back was pure silver, expensive, deadly, designed to kill wolves quickly. 100 yards, Seraphina breathed. The advanced scout just found Henrik's body. Henrik had been the decoy watchman, positioned exactly where Seraphina's visions showed the assassins would strike first. Except Henrik was actually a rolled bundle of blankets with a helmet perched on top. The real guards were hidden, waiting. The first indication of attack was the kitchen door exploding inward. 2 figures in black rushed through, silver blades already swinging, and ran straight into Garrick's calculated ambush. He took the first one down with brutal efficiency, but the second was faster, rolling past to strike and coming up with knives aimed at Seraphina. Alara moved on pure instinct, clearing the bar in a leap that would have been impossible for a human. Her blade caught the assassin's wrist, sending one knife spinning away. They crashed together in a tangle of limbs and fury, and Alara felt the hot sting of a blade opening her shoulder even as she drove her own weapon between the assassin's ribs. The front door shattered simultaneously. For more assassins poured through, and suddenly the tavern erupted into chaos. Tavern met them head-on, his silver sword singing through the air. He moved like violence given form, precise, economical, devastating. 2 assassins went down in the first exchange, throats opened before they could even raise their weapons. Above them, the second-floor window crashed inward right on schedule. But the warriors waiting there were ready, and Alara heard the thud of bodies hitting floorboards, the grunt of hand-to-hand combat in close quarters. Alara, you're left. Seraphina's warning came a heartbeat before another assassin materialized from the shadows near the fireplace. Alara spun, bringing her blade up just in time to deflect a strike aimed at her kidney. This one was better trained, faster, and Alara found herself driven back step by step. Then Tavern was there, his sword taking the assassin's head off with a single devastating swing. Blood sprayed across the wall. "You're bleeding," he said, eyes cataloging her shoulder wound. "I'm fine. Behind you." They moved together instinctively, Tavern high and Alara low, their combined assault overwhelming the assassin who'd tried to flank them. The body hadn't even hit the ground before they were spinning back to back, scanning for the next threat. "This is too easy," Alara panted. Seraphina said 12. "I've counted 7. The real killers haven't arrived yet." Tavern's voice was grim. "These are just..." The remaining windows exploded inward simultaneously, glass shredding the air. 5 more figures dropped into the room, and these moved differently, professional, coordinated, lethal. Alara recognized the difference immediately. These weren't hired muscle. These were veteran warriors. One of them launched directly at Seraphina. Alara screamed her sister's name, trying to intercept, but 2 more assassins blocked her path. She fought with desperate fury, taking hits she should have blocked because her attention was split between her opponents and her sister. Seraphina's oracle marks flared, so bright the entire tavern lit up like daylight. The assassin reaching for her froze mid-step, suddenly screaming, clawing at his own eyes as if seeing something that broke his mind. He dropped to his knees, and Seraphina simply stepped around him, her hand outstretched toward the window. "He's here," she said in that eerie dual voice. "Your brother is here." Kale entered through the shattered front door like a king claiming his throne. He was beautiful in the way poisonous things are beautiful, sharp features, cold smile, amber eyes identical to Theron's, but empty of anything resembling warmth. He wore light armor that probably cost more than the entire tavern, and the sword in his hand was etched with runes that made Alara's wolf recoil instinctively. "Brother." Kale's voice was smooth, cultured, utterly devoid of concern for the bodies littering the floor. "You've made this considerably more difficult than it needed to be." "It's over, Kale." Tavern moved to place himself between his brother and Seraphina. "I have the evidence. The council knows everything. Surrender, and I'll grant you exile instead of execution." Kale laughed, the sound bright and terrible. "You think I care about the council? About evidence." He gestured at the carnage around them. "I'll kill the oracle, kill you, and tell them you both died defending her from rogues. Who's going to contradict me? The warriors loyal to you." His smile widened. "They'll have tragic accidents on the journey home." He moved like lightning, his rune blade humming as it cut through the air toward Tavern. The brothers collided with a force that shook the building's foundations, both of them enhanced by alpha bloodlines, both bred for battle. They were terrifyingly matched, same training, same strength, same lethal grace. But Kale fought with the freedom of someone who'd already abandoned honor, while Tavern was protecting something precious. And that made him predictable. Alara saw it happening in horrible slow motion. Kale feinted high, Tavern blocked instinctively, and Kale's blade redirected mid-strike to slash across Theron's ribs. Not a killing blow, but enough to slow him, to make him stumble. Cale pressed his advantage ruthlessly, driving Tavern back step by step toward the overturned tables. His rune blade caught Tavern's shoulder, his thigh, small wounds accumulating into something dangerous. Tavern was losing. Seraphina run. Alara tried to reach her sister, but another assassin blocked her path. She took him down with vicious efficiency, but more kept coming, and she realized with sick certainty that Cale had brought reinforcements. They were being overwhelmed. That's when Seraphina's oracle marks exploded with power unlike anything Alara had seen. Not just light now, but tangible force, silver energy that radiated from her sister in waves. Every assassin within 10 feet was thrown backwards, slamming into walls hard enough to crack wood. The air itself seemed to crystallize, reality bending around Seraphina like she was the center of some vast metaphysical storm. No more. Seraphina's voice echoed with the weight of prophecy, of fate speaking through mortal lips. Her eyes had gone completely silver, no white visible, and when she moved it was with inhuman grace. I see you, Cale. I see every future that branches from this moment, and in none of them do you survive. Cale turned toward her, contempt written across his face. An oracle. How dramatic. Let me show you what I think of. He never finished the sentence, because Seraphina was already moving, and the oracle power flowing through her let her see exactly where he'd be, exactly how he'd strike, exactly where his guard would drop. She flowed around his blade like water, and her hand, just her bare hand, glowing with silver fire, pressed against his chest. The rune blade fell from his suddenly nerveless fingers. He staggered back, looking down at his chest where Seraphina's handprint burned through armor, through skin, straight to his heart. You tried to kill me twice, Seraphina said softly, terribly. Once when I was 16 and innocent. Once more when I'd finally found the courage to stop hiding. The oracle shows me mercy is sometimes cruelty. That some wounds can only be healed by ending what caused them. Cale opened his mouth, perhaps to plead or threaten, but only blood came out. He collapsed, his eyes still wide with shock, and Alara realized her sister had just killed the Alpha King's brother with nothing but oracle power and perfect, prophetic knowledge of exactly where to strike. The remaining assassins saw their leader fall and broke. Those who could still walk fled into the night. Those who couldn't surrendered immediately, throwing down weapons with shaking hands. Theron stared at his brother's body, at the female who'd just saved his life, at the tavern painted with blood and broken glass. Then his knees gave out, and Alara caught him before he hit the ground. I've got you, she said, and meant it. We've got you. Seraphina knelt beside them, her marks finally dimming, her eyes returning to their normal color. She looked exhausted, hollow, and utterly changed. I killed him, she whispered. I saw it coming and I still. You saved us. Theron's hand found hers, blood-slicked and shaking. You saved everyone. Outside, dawn was breaking. The nightmare had lasted less than an hour, but Alara felt like they'd aged years. She looked at her sister. No longer the fragile girl she'd been protecting, but a woman who'd claimed her power and used it to end the threat that had haunted them for 7 years. It's over, Alara said, and finally believed it. Alara woke to sunlight streaming through an unfamiliar window and the sharp ache of healing wounds pulling across her shoulder and ribs. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't place where she was, then memory crashed back. The battle.
Cale's body.
Seraphina glowing with oracle fire. She sat up carefully, finding herself in a bed that smelled of clean linen and the sharp herbal scent of healing poultices. The room was small but well-appointed, clearly one of the better chambers in the tavern. Someone had cleaned and bandaged her wounds while she slept, dressed her in a soft cotton shirt that definitely wasn't hers. The door opened quietly. Theron stood in the doorway, shirtless despite the morning chill, his torso wrapped in white bandages that were already seeping red in places. He carried a tray with bread, cheese, and tea. You shouldn't be up, Alara said automatically. Neither should you. He set the tray on the small table beside her bed. But here we are, 2 stubborn wolves pretending we're not half dead. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Serafina insisted I bring you food. She said if I didn't, she'd have a vision of me choking on my own breakfast, and she'd let it happen. Despite everything, Alara felt her lips twitch. She's developing a sense of humor. That's new. She's developing a lot of things. Theron lowered himself carefully into the room's single chair, moving like a man with cracked ribs and pulled muscles. The oracle power that surged through her during the fight, it didn't fade completely when the battle ended. She's been having visions all morning. Small things mostly. Garrick tripping over his own boots. The baker burning the morning bread. One of the villagers proposing to his sweetheart next week. Is she all right? She's adapting. He was quiet for a moment, staring at his bandaged hands. I should have protected you both better. Should have anticipated Kale would bring reinforcements beyond what Serafina saw. Stop. Alara's voice came out sharper than intended. You can't see every threat. Can't prevent every wound. That's what I've been trying to do for 7 years, and look where it got us. She forced herself to meet his eyes. I owe you an apology. A real one, not the half-hearted acknowledgement I gave before. Theron shook his head. You don't. I do. She cut him off firmly. I judged you without evidence. Condemned you without trial. I let my grief and rage make me see the worst in you, and because of that, I stole 7 years from you and Serafina both. 7 years she could have been learning to use her gifts safely. 7 years you could have been mates instead of mourning. 7 years of running that damaged her in ways I'm only starting to see. The words caught in her throat, but she forced them out. I thought I was protecting her. But really, I was just holding her prisoner. Keeping her small and scared because I was small and scared.
And I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry for what I took from you both. Theron's expression had gone soft, understanding rather than triumphant. You saved her life that night. If you hadn't taken her, if you'd let me find her when I arrived, Kale would have known immediately that his first attempt failed. He would have sent assassins within weeks, and I wouldn't have known to watch for them. Your grief bought us 7 years to uncover his conspiracy. That's generous interpretation of my cowardice.
No.
It's truth. He leaned forward despite the obvious pain it cost him. You made the best decision you could with the information you had.
I don't fault you for that.
But now we move forward with better information, agreed? Alara nodded, feeling something tight in her chest finally loosen. Forgiveness she hadn't earned, but was being offered anyway. Where is Serafina now? In the kitchen, insisting on making breakfast despite the fact that we have 3 perfectly capable warriors who could cook. His smile turned genuinely warm. She's trying very hard to pretend everything is normal, that she didn't kill a man with her bare hands 12 hours ago. Is she? Alara struggled for words. Is she handling it? I don't know yet.
We talked for a while before dawn. She cried.
I held her. She said she doesn't regret it, which worries me more than if she did. Theron's jaw tightened. Kale was my brother. My blood. And she ended him to save me. That's a burden she shouldn't have to carry. She'd carry worse to keep you safe. That's what the mate bond means, isn't it?
Yes.
But she's 23 years old, and she's already lost more than most wolves face in a lifetime. His voice dropped lower. I want to give her peace. Time to heal, to learn her powers without fear, to just be young for once. But I'm the Alpha King. Taking her to the capital means throwing her into court politics, council scrutiny, wolves who'll question her legitimacy as Luna. Alara absorbed that, thinking through implications. You're considering abdicating. I'm considering what's best for her. And what does she say about that? Theron's laugh was quiet and rueful. That if I abdicate, she'll have visions of me being miserable for the next 50 years and she'll never let me hear the end of it. That she didn't survive this long and kill Kale just to hide in another tavern. His eyes met Alara's. She wants to go to the capital. To claim her place as Luna and Oracle both. To stop running. Then we go. The decision felt right the moment Alara spoke it. All 3 of us. You're not dragging her there as a king claiming his mate. We're going as family. Together. You'd come? Surprise flickered across his face. The capital isn't safe. There will be Kale's remaining supporters, wolves who resent Oracle influence, political games designed to tear us apart. All the more reason Seraphina needs someone who loves her watching her back. Alara stood carefully, testing her wounds. Besides, I've spent 7 years protecting her from imaginary threats. Might as well put those skills toward fighting real ones. Footsteps on the stairs announced Seraphina's arrival before she appeared in the doorway, balancing a plate piled with eggs and bacon. Her oracle marks were visible above the neckline of her simple dress, no longer hidden or suppressed. They pulsed with faint silver light in time with her heartbeat. "I had a vision you two were having important conversations without me," she said with mock severity. "So, I'm interrupting before you make plans about my life." "We were just discussing the journey to the capital," Tavern said, reaching for her hand. "If you're certain, I'm certain." Seraphina set the plate down and settled on the bed beside Alara, taking her sister's hand in her free one. "I've been hiding for 7 years, living half a life, suppressing half of who I am. The oracle in me has been screaming to be used, to be seen, to serve the purpose I was born for." Her marks flared brighter. "I'm the last of my bloodline, the last oracle. If I hide now, if I let fear win, then Kale succeeded in destroying us even though he's dead." Alara squeezed her sister's hand. "You understand what you're walking into? Court politics make tavern brawls look civilized. I know. I've seen pieces of it in visions." Seraphina's smile was small but determined. "I've seen wolves who'll hate me for being oracle, for being commonborn, for taking the king's attention. I've seen challenges and sneering nobles and whispered accusations. But I've also seen—" Her eyes found Tavern's. "I've seen us happy. Not immediately, not without struggle. But eventually. I've seen our children learning to shift in the palace gardens. Seen you teaching our son diplomacy, while I teach our daughter prophecy. Seen Alara training the fiercest warriors the pack has ever known." "You've seen all that?" Tavern's voice roughened with emotion. "Possible futures. Nothing is certain." But Seraphina's smile widened. "But these are futures worth fighting for. Worth claiming. So yes, we go to the capital. We face whatever comes. And we do it together, all 3 of us, because apparently family means the people who fight beside you, not just the blood you're born with." She looked between them expectantly.
"Well,
"Are we doing this, or are we going to sit around being wounded and philosophical all day?" Alara laughed, really laughed, for the first time in longer than she could remember. "I suppose we are. Though maybe we let ourselves heal for a few days before we start the journey? I'd rather not fall off my horse halfway there." 3 days, Tavern said decisively. "That gives us time to send advance notice to the capital, prepare proper transport, and let our wounds close enough that we don't look like we barely survived an assassination attempt." "We did barely survive an assassination attempt," Alara pointed out. "Yes, but we don't need to advertise it to every ambitious wolf who thinks they can challenge a wounded king." His expression hardened slightly. "Let them see us arrive healthy, whole, and united. Let them see their new Luna blazing with oracle power and the captain of her guard who killed 5 of Kale's best assassins. Let them understand that we're not easy prey." Seraphina's marks pulsed with approval. "I like how you think. Also, I just had a vision of Garrick falling down the stairs in exactly 30 seconds, so if someone wants to go, catch him." A crash and a string of creative cursing from below confirmed her prediction. Tavern sighed, levering himself up. "I'll go ensure my second didn't break his neck. You two rest." After he left, Alara leaned back against the headboard, studying her sister. "You're different. Even from yesterday. I killed someone. That changes you." Seraphina's voice went quiet. "But also, I'm not hiding anymore. Not my marks, not my gifts, not who I'm meant to be. For 7 years I've been half alive, half asleep. Now I'm awake." She turned to Alara. "Are you angry? That I'm choosing this instead of safety?" "No," Alara said honestly. "I'm terrified. But I'm also proud. You're braver than I ever was." She pulled her sister into a careful hug. And wherever you go, whatever you choose, I'm with you. No more running. We face it together. Outside the window, warriors were already preparing for the journey ahead, their voices rising in the morning air. Somewhere in the capital, a throne awaited its queen. And for the first time in 7 years, the future felt like something worth claiming instead of something to fear. The capital rose from the plains like something out of legend, massive stone walls stretching toward the sky, towers bearing banners that snapped in the wind, and beyond them, the royal fortress itself, carved from mountain rock and reinforced with generations of alpha power. Seraphina's horse shifted nervously beneath her as they crested the final hill, sensing her anxiety. "Breathe," Tavern murmured from beside her. "They can smell fear from here." Comforting. But Seraphina straightened her spine, letting her oracle marks show clearly above the neckline of the traveling dress they'd commissioned in the last town. No more hiding. The marks caught sunlight and threw it back as silver fire. Behind them rode Alara with Garrick and 20 warriors, a formal escort befitting a king returning with his mate. The 5-day journey had been strange, part military procession, part family trip, with evenings spent around campfires learning each other's rhythms. Seraphina had discovered Tavern could barely cook, but told excellent stories. Alara and Garrick had developed a competitive sparring routine that usually ended with both of them in the dirt, laughing. The mate bond between Seraphina and Tavern had deepened with every shared sunrise, every quiet conversation, every moment she learned the man beneath the crown. But now reality waited beyond those gates, and it wouldn't be gentle. The city erupted as they entered. Thousands of wolves lined the streets, some cheering, some simply staring, many whispering behind their hands as they caught sight of the oracle marks blazing on Seraphina's throat. She heard the words carried on the wind: common-born, mysterious, the lost mate, oracle corruption. Fear and hope mixed in equal measure. Tavern guided his horse closer to hers, a silent statement of unity. Alara moved up on her other side, hand resting casually on her sword hilt. Protected, flanked, claimed. The message was clear to anyone watching. The fortress courtyard was worse. The entire council had assembled, along with what looked like half the court. Elder Hadron stood at the center, his gray beard and severe expression radiating disapproval. Beside him were other elders, generals, nobles, all of them studying Seraphina with varying degrees of skepticism. They dismounted, and Tavern immediately took Seraphina's hand, pulling her forward. "Council, I present Seraphina of the Oracle bloodline. My fated mate. You're Luna." The silence was deafening. Then Elder Hadron spoke, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "We are pleased to learn your mate survived, Your Majesty. However, you will understand the Council has concerns. 7 years is a long absence. We must verify." "Verify what?" Tavern's voice went cold. "That she's an oracle? Look at her marks. That she's my mate? Our bond is visible to anyone with eyes. That she's legitimate." His alpha power rolled out, making lesser wolves drop their gazes. "Careful how you finish that sentence, Elder." "We simply wish to ensure the pack's stability," another council member interjected smoothly. "Perhaps Lady Seraphina could demonstrate her oracle abilities? For the pack's peace of mind." It was a trap, Seraphina realized. Refuse and seem like a fraud. Succeed and they'd claim she was showing off, trying to intimidate. There was no winning move. Except there was. Because the oracle was already showing her something. Elder Hadron. Seraphina's voice rang out clear and strong, carrying that dual quality that meant prophecy was speaking. "Your daughter is with child.
A boy.
He will be born healthy during the first snow, and you will name him Marcus after your father." She turned to the smooth-voiced council member. "Lord Garrett, the investments you made in the southern mines will yield triple returns within the year, but only if you avoid the eastern expansion your advisors are suggesting. That route leads to collapse." She continued, naming truths she should know, private information, future events, secrets that made council members pale. Not threats, just proof. Undeniable, specific, impossible to fake. The oracle bloodline doesn't require verification, she said finally, her marks blazing so bright several wolves had to shade their eyes. It simply is. You either accept that, or you question your king's judgment in recognizing his own mate. Which is it going to be? Elder Hadron was the first to kneel. Luna, he said, the title carrying weight. Forgive the council's caution. We are honored by your presence. The others followed, some more reluctantly than others. But they all knelt, and that was what mattered. That evening, in the royal chambers that still felt foreign despite Tavern insisting they were hers, Seraphina finally let herself shake. The visions had been accurate, but they'd also been exhausting, pulling her in a dozen directions at once. You are magnificent, Tavern said, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. I was terrified. They couldn't tell. He kissed her temple. Though for the record, you didn't need to prove anything. I would have fought the council if they'd pushed harder. I know, but I needed to prove it to myself. She leaned into his warmth. That I could stand in front of hundreds of wolves and not break. That I'm more than just the girl who survived. A knock interrupted them. Alara entered without waiting for permission, which made Seraphina smile. Her sister would never master court etiquette and didn't care to try. Tavern, the council wants to meet with you. Something about Kale's remaining supporters. Alara's expression suggested she'd rather fight them than negotiate. Also, apparently there's some question about my position here. Lord Garrett seems to think I'm your personal bodyguard and should be housed with the regular guard. Tavern's jaw tightened. You're captain of the Luna's guard. I thought I made that clear. You did. They're choosing not to hear it. Alara crossed her arms. There's apparently some tradition about the Luna's guard being selected from noble houses, and I'm very much not nobility. The Oracle Luna doesn't follow tradition, Seraphina said firmly. She makes new ones. You're my sister, Alara. You're the person I trust most in the world besides Tavern. If they don't like it, they can take it up with the visions I have of you saving my life repeatedly over the next 20 years. You've seen that. Possible futures. But yes. Seraphina smiled. One where you tackled an assassin through a window. Another where you're teaching my daughter how to throw knives. Several where you're cursing out nobles who insult me, which I appreciate very much. Alara's expression softened. Captain of the Luna's Guard. That's actually a real title. It will be once I create the position formally, Tavern said. Along with appropriate quarters, salary, and authority to recruit your own warriors. I'm thinking 20 to start. Wolves loyal to you, and Seraphina specifically, separate from my personal guard. Female warriors. Alara said immediately. If I'm building something new, we do it right. Train women who've been told they're not strong enough, not fast enough, not aggressive enough. Prove them all wrong. Done. Tavern's smile was sharp. Let the council mutter. By the time they realize we're rebuilding pack structure from the inside out, it'll be too late to stop us. The mate bond ceremony was scheduled for 3 days hence, giving time for preparations and for the pack to adjust to their new Luna. Seraphina spent those days meeting endless nobles, memorizing names and faces, learning which wolves were genuinely welcoming and which were watching for weakness. Her oracle gifts helped, showing her glimpses of true intentions, but it was exhausting work. The morning of the ceremony, Alara helped her dress in formal robes that were simultaneously too heavy and too revealing, designed to display her oracle marks prominently. You look like a Luna, her sister said quietly. Powerful. Untouchable. I feel like I'm going to be sick. That too. Alara adjusted the silver circlet that would mark Seraphina as Tavern's acknowledged mate. But you'll do it anyway, because that's who you are now. Not the girl who hid in tavern kitchens. The woman who killed Kale with her bare hands and stared down a hostile council, without flinching. Seraphina met her sister's eyes in the mirror. Will you stand with me? During the ceremony? I know it's not traditional. Since when do we care about traditional? Alara's smile was fierce. I'll be right there. Always. As sunset approached, and they prepared to walk to the sacred grove where the ceremony would be held, Seraphina caught a vision, not of danger this time, but of joy. She saw herself and Tavern under moonlight, saw the mate marks appearing on both their skins, saw Alara's proud face, and the pack's acceptance howled to the stars. "It's going to be beautiful," she whispered. Theron appeared in the doorway, dressed in ceremonial armor that made him look every inch the warrior king. His eyes found hers and softened impossibly. "Ready?" "Yes." And she was. Ready to stop running, to claim her destiny, to become Luna and Oracle both. Ready to build a life that honored everything she'd survived and everything she'd become. They walked together toward the grove, toward the ceremony that would bind them forever, toward a future that finally felt like theirs to write. The sacred grove had existed longer than the capital itself, ancient trees forming a natural cathedral under the full moon. Thousands of pack members surrounded the clearing in concentric circles, their eyes reflecting moonlight as they watched their Alpha King and his Oracle mate approach the ceremonial stone at the grove's heart. Seraphina's marks blazed so bright, they cast silver shadows across the ground. The Oracle power surging through her wasn't just her own anymore, it was responding to the moon, to the land itself, to the collective energy of every wolf present. She felt vast, untethered, barely contained in her own skin. Theron's hand in hers was the only anchor keeping her grounded. The High Elder waited at the stone, ancient enough that his wolf was more legend than memory. He spoke the ritual words in the old language, calling upon the moon goddess to witness the binding. Theron responded in kind, his voice steady despite the emotion flickering in his amber eyes. Then it was Seraphina's turn. "I, Seraphina, last of the Oracle bloodline, claim Theron as my mate, my king, my chosen bond. I bring prophecy to this union, wisdom to guide our pack, and power to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Her voice rang with dual tones, Oracle and woman speaking as one. "The moon goddess has shown me our path, and I walk it willingly." The High Elder drew a silver blade, making ritual cuts on both their palms. When their blood mingled, the mate bond that had been building for 7 years finally locked into place with devastating force. Seraphina gasped as sensation flooded through her. Theron's emotions crashing against hers, his love and pride and fierce protectiveness tangling with her own joy and terror and absolute certainty. The oracle marks on her collarbone began spreading, silver lines crawling across her shoulders and down her arms in intricate patterns that had been sleeping in her bloodline for generations. On Theron's chest, matching marks appeared, not oracle silver, but something darker, a complement rather than a copy. Pack bond and mate bond and oracle gift weaving together into something unprecedented. The grove erupted with light, not just from Seraphina's marks, but from the trees themselves, from the earth, from the very air. The oracle power reaching its apex, connecting her to everything, past, present, possible futures spiraling out in infinite directions. She saw it all in that moment. Every wolf in the grove, their hopes and fears laid bare. The pack's history stretching back centuries. The children who had come from this union, strong and blessed with gifts. The challenges ahead, political rivals, natural disasters, threats from neighboring territories. And through it all, Theron at her side, Alara watching their backs, the three of them facing whatever came together. When Seraphina returned to herself, she was on her knees with Theron cradling her against his chest. The pack was howling, not in alarm but in joy, their voices rising to meet the full moon. She realized dimly that Alara had pushed through the crowd and was kneeling beside them, one hand on Seraphina's shoulder. "Welcome back," her sister said with forced lightness. "You were glowing so bright we thought you might actually ascend to the moon goddess herself." "Not yet." Seraphina's laugh was shaky. "I have too much left to do here first." The celebration lasted until dawn. There was food and drink and dancing, wolves from every corner of the territory coming forward to offer congratulations and loyalty. Seraphina accepted it all with growing confidence, her oracle gifts showing her who was genuine and who was performing for appearances. Lord Garrett, she noticed, left early. His wife congratulated them with warmth, but Garrett himself barely concealed his resentment. The oracle showed Seraphina exactly why. He'd been among those counseling Theron to choose a more politically advantageous mate, to forget the dead oracle and move forward. Her survival and return had humiliated him in front of the council. "He'll be a problem," Seraphina murmured to Theron during a quiet moment.
"I know."
"But not tonight." Theron pulled her closer. "Tonight is ours." The following months settled into something that almost felt like normalcy. Seraphina took up her duties as Luna, learning pack politics with the same determination she'd once used to suppress her gifts. The oracle visions guided her, showing her which disputes needed her intervention and which would resolve themselves. She started holding public prophecy sessions once a week, offering guidance to any pack member who sought it. Alara threw herself into building the Luna's Guard with fierce enthusiasm. She recruited 20 females, some experienced warriors, others complete novices who'd been denied training because of their gender. The training yard became Alara's domain, and she ran it with exacting standards that left her recruits exhausted but fiercely loyal. "Captain Alara is terrifying," one young noble told Seraphina after his sister joined the guard. "She made them run 20 miles in full armor yesterday." "She made me do the same when I was recovering from the assassin attack," Seraphina replied serenely. "It builds character." Theron balanced kingship with being mate, somehow finding time for both despite council demands and pack obligations. He took Seraphina riding in the mornings before court sessions. They had dinner together most evenings, just the three of them, Theron, Seraphina, and Alara, talking about everything and nothing. It was the family none of them had expected to build, unconventional but unbreakable. 2 months after the bonding ceremony, Seraphina woke feeling different. Not ill exactly, just altered. Her oracle marks were glowing without conscious effort, pulsing with a rhythm that wasn't quite her heartbeat. She knew before the healer confirmed it. The visions had been trying to tell her for days, showing her a future that now felt inevitable rather than merely possible. "I'm pregnant," she told Theron that evening, watching his face transform from surprise to wonder to fierce protectiveness in the space of 3 seconds. "Are you certain?" The oracle is never wrong about these things. Also, the healer confirmed it, which helps. She took his hand, placing it over her still flat stomach. "A girl. She'll have oracle gifts like mine and alpha strength like yours. She'll be impossible and perfect, and I already love her more than I thought possible." Theron pulled her close, his voice rough with emotion. "I won't fail her. Or you. I swear it." "I know." And she did. The visions showed her futures where challenges came. They always did. But futures where they faced them together, protected their children fiercely, built something lasting. They told Alara the next morning, and her sister's reaction was characteristically blunt. "Good. She'll need someone to teach her how to fight when you two are busy being disgustingly in love." "I volunteer." "She's not even born yet," Seraphina protested, laughing. Perfect time to start planning her training regimen. But Alara's eyes were suspiciously bright, and when she hugged Seraphina, it was gentle in a way only family could be. "I'm happy for you. For both of you. You deserve this." The public announcement came during the next council session, and if some members looked less than thrilled about an heir with oracle blood, they kept it to themselves. Elder Hadron actually smiled, which Seraphina had thought might be physically impossible. The pack celebrated for 3 days. Gifts poured in from every territory, blankets and toys and weapons that wouldn't be useful for years, but carried blessings anyway. Seraphina's oracle chamber was overflowing with offerings by the time it ended. 3 months after the bonding ceremony, Seraphina stood on the fortress battlements with Theron and Alara, watching the sun set over the capital. Her hand rested on the small bump that was just beginning to show, and peace settled in her chest like a long-held breath finally released. "Do you ever miss it?" Alara asked quietly. "The tavern. The quiet."
"Sometimes," Seraphina admitted.
"But I was hiding there, not living. This." She gestured at the sprawling city below, the territory stretching to the horizon, the fortress full of wolves who now called her Luna. "This is living. Messy and complicated and sometimes terrifying, but alive. The oracle shows me we'll face challenges," she continued. "Threats from outside, problems within the pack, moments where we'll doubt ourselves. But she also shows me us, still standing together. Still fighting. Still choosing each other. Theron's arm came around her waist. Then, that's the future we'll make real. Below them, the Luna's guard was running drills, Alara's voice carrying across the yard as she corrected stances and praised improvements. In the courtyard, pack members went about their evening routines, safe and stable under their king and Luna's protection. Inside the fortress, council members plotted and planned, but none of it felt threatening anymore, just the normal workings of pack politics that Seraphina was learning to navigate. "We did it," Alara said, her voice carrying wonder. "We actually survived. More than survived, thrived." Seraphina's marks glowed softly in the fading light, and for once the visions that came were simple. Dinner together, laughter over shared stories, the baby kicking in a few months while Theron read to her stomach. Small moments that mattered more than prophecies or politics. "Yes," she agreed, leaning into her mate's warmth while her sister stood guard beside them. "We did." The Oracle bloodline would continue. The pack would prosper. And the family they'd built from ashes and trust and hard-won forgiveness would endure whatever came next. That was the future worth fighting for. And they'd claimed it together. 6 months had transformed Seraphina from Luna to legend. Her pregnant belly curved proudly beneath the oracle robe she wore for ceremonial occasions, though tonight she'd chosen something simpler, soft wool that didn't restrict movement and let her breathe despite the baby pressing against her lungs. The child kicked constantly now, as if already impatient to enter the world and claim her place. "She's restless tonight," Seraphina murmured, placing a hand over the spot where tiny feet drummed against her ribs. Theron looked up from the stack of reports he'd been reviewing at their private dinner table, concern flickering across his face. "Are you well? Should I call the healer?" "I'm fine. She just has opinions about sitting still." Seraphina smiled as another kick landed. "Strong opinions, apparently. I think she gets that from both of us." Alara entered without knocking, as had become her habit. She was still in training leathers, her hair escaping its braid, a fresh bruise blooming on her jaw that she wore like a badge of honor. "Your guard is getting dangerously confident. 2 of them actually managed to disarm me today." "Only 2. Theron's tone was teasing. "You're getting soft, Captain. Careful, Your Majesty. I can still make you regret that statement." But Alara was grinning as she collapsed into the 3rd chair at their table, the one that was always set for her now. "What's for dinner?" "I'm starving." The meal was simple: roasted meat, fresh bread, vegetables from the fortress gardens. No formality, no servants hovering, just the 3 of them eating and talking like the family they'd become. Alara complained about a promising recruit who couldn't stop dropping her sword. Theron shared news from the border territories, all peaceful, for once. Seraphina told them about the vision she'd had that morning of Elder Hadron's grandson taking his first steps next month. "You're turning the council soft with these visions," Alara said, tearing into her bread. "Hadron actually smiled at me yesterday. I didn't know his face could do that. Prophecy about family tends to soften people." Seraphina shifted, trying to find a comfortable position. "Though I had a less pleasant vision about Lord Garrett. He's planning to petition the council about foreign influences corrupting traditional pack structure. By which he means me." Theron's expression hardened. "I'll deal with Garrett. No need. I've seen how it plays out. He makes his petition. I offer a public prophecy about his future grandchildren prospering under Oracle guidance, and he realizes opposing me means opposing his own family's fortune. He withdraws the petition within a week." She reached for Theron's hand. "Not every battle needs to be fought with force. Sometimes the Oracle's greatest weapon is showing people what they stand to lose." They finished dinner as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. On impulse, Seraphina suggested they take the evening air on the battlements, the place that had become their refuge when court politics grew suffocating. The wind was gentle tonight, carrying the scent of the city below. Cooking fires, horses, the 1,000 small smells of life continuing in the pack's heart. Seraphina stood between Tavern and Alara, protected on both sides as she'd been since that first moment in the tavern when her world had cracked open. "Do you remember what I asked you once?" Alara said quietly. "If you regretted the 7 years of running?" "I remember." Serafina's hand rested on her belly, feeling the baby settle into sleep finally. "You asked when we were planning the journey here. And you said you regretted the fear, but not surviving." Alara was staring out at the territory spread below them. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About fear, and what it costs us." Alara. "No, let me finish." Her sister's voice was uncharacteristically soft. "I spent 7 years making decisions based on fear. Fear of losing you. Fear of trusting anyone. Fear of what would happen if I stopped running and stood still long enough for danger to catch up." She finally looked at Serafina. "And, because of that fear, I almost cost you everything. Your mate, your gifts, your chance to become who you were meant to be." "You saved my life," Serafina said firmly. "Multiple times. The massacre, the recovery, every close call during those 7 years. You kept me alive. But barely living. There's a difference." Alara's jaw tightened. "These last 6 months, watching you thrive, seeing you use your gifts without fear, watching you and Tavern build something beautiful, it's made me realize how much my protection became a prison. How my love became a cage." Tavern spoke quietly. "You did what you thought was right with the information you had. No one faults you for that. Maybe you should." Alara's smile was bitter. "Maybe I should fault myself more. But instead, I'm trying to learn from it. Trying to teach my guard that protection doesn't mean control, that keeping someone safe doesn't mean keeping them small." She looked at Serafina's belly. "I want to do better for her. For your daughter. I want to be the aunt who teaches her to be strong, not the aunt who teaches her to be afraid." Serafina caught her sister's hand, squeezing tight. "You already are. You're teaching her through how you've changed, how you've grown. That's the real lesson, not that we never make mistakes, but that we learn from them and become better." The oracle marks on Serafina's skin began glowing, that telltale sign of visions rising. She didn't fight it this time, just let the sight wash over her. Images flooded through, not just immediate future, but generations ahead. Her daughter grown, training with Alara in this same courtyard. Her son, yes, there would be a boy too, learning diplomacy from Tavern while Serafina taught him to read prophecies. Grandchildren carrying oracle marks and alpha strength both, serving the pack with wisdom and power balanced perfectly. She saw threats too, challenges from rival packs, natural disasters, internal conflicts. But through it all, she saw her family standing firm. Saw the legacy they would build not through force alone but through trust hard-won and bonds that refused to break. "What do you see?" Tavern asked, though he probably knew from the way her marks blazed. "Peace," Serafina whispered. "Not the absence of conflict, but something harder one. Peace built on truth instead of fear. On trust instead of control. On choices freely made instead of destiny forced." Her free hand found Tavern's. "I see our children knowing both of their parents. Growing up safe not because they're hidden but because they're protected by people who love them and trust them to become strong." "How many generations?" Alara's voice carried wonder. "At least 5 that I can see clearly. Maybe more beyond that. The visions get hazy the further out they go." Serafina smiled through tears she didn't remember starting to cry. "The oracle bloodline doesn't end with me. It flourishes. And the pack flourishes with it because we learned that some bonds cannot be broken by time or distance or fear. That family means the people who fight beside you and catch you when you fall and trust you to make your own mistakes and love you anyway." The baby kicked hard, as if agreeing, and all 3 of them laughed, the sound carrying across the battlements, across the fortress, out into the territory they protected and served. "7 years ago, I was running for my life," Serafina said softly. 6 months ago, I was terrified of being seen. Now I stand here as Luna, as Oracle, as mate and sister and soon-to-be mother, and I'm not afraid anymore. Not of my power, not of my destiny, not of the challenges ahead." She looked at the 2 people flanking her, her mate and her sister, both of whom had fought for her in different ways, both of whom she trusted with everything. That's what you taught me, Ilara. Not that I should hide from danger, but that I don't have to face it alone. And Tavern, you taught me that protection doesn't mean possession, that love means supporting someone's choices even when they terrify you. And what did you teach us? Tavern asked, his voice rough with emotion. That some bonds are written in the stars, but it takes courage to reach up and claim them. That healing requires facing painful truths rather than building walls. That trust is a choice we make every day, not a feeling that happens to us. Her marks pulsed brighter. And that sometimes, love means letting go of the rope you've been clinging to and trusting that those you love can fly on their own. Below them, the city was settling into evening rhythms. Lamps were being lit, children called home for dinner, the guard changing shifts with practiced precision. Life continuing, safe and stable, in the territory they'd fought so hard to protect. Serafina placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby settle into sleep, feeling the mate bond thrumming with contentment, feeling her sister's solid presence beside her. The oracle showed her one final vision, this moment immortalized, the three of them on the battlements at sunset, the beginning of a legacy that would echo through generations. Some bonds cannot be broken, she said, speaking to both of them and to the child sleeping inside her and to the future stretching out ahead. Not by fear or distance or time or death itself. Some families are written not just in blood but in the choices we make to keep finding each other, keep trusting each other, keep fighting for each other. Again and again and again. The moon rose over the capital, full and bright, blessing them with silver light. And the oracle Luna stood between her mate and her sister, carrying the next generation of their hard-won peace, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. That was the only prophecy that mattered. That was the future they'd claimed.
And it was enough.